We are live. We are live. Welcome to college football's Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Flugar. We cover everything in college football because we love everything in college football. And if you do as well, please subscribe to our ever-growing channel. Smash the like button if you like our content. Share the video with your family and friends. If you want to support this channel, the one way to do so, or there's two ways to do so. One is with a donation. Hit the $ with a comment, and we'll get to your comment as soon as we possibly can. The other one is to smash that like button. Thank you for coming on in. Welcome into the studio that sits on the corner of Keith Jackson Parkway and Kurt Gowdy Avenue. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to be a PATC legend with your phone calls and with your comments. We're going to open up the phone lines later in the show. We've got a stack show. I don't know if we will be able to get through it all. Want to talk about what's happening in the state of Washington today. We're going to be going through an article by Ross Dellenger, Yahoo Sports. Who is going to control the Pac-12? In other words, who's going to control the revenue that's coming on in from last year's 2022, 2023, 2024 academic season, athletic season? Who's going to control all that money? Is it going to be just Oregon State, Washington State, or is the 10 schools, are they going to get some of that bread that they believe they should get? There is a judge. A decision is expected, at least in this particular hearing. in the state of Washington, and we'll be going through it, there is an expectation that there's going to be some decision handed down right at the end of this hearing today, or a little bit of time afterwards. But there is an expectation, well, there's a perception that the decision, for now, because this might get appealed, get kicked up to the higher courts, there's a perception that we're going to have a decision by the end of the hearing. Now, the hearing in the state of Washington starts at 2 o'clock Eastern today. That's 1 o'clock Central. That's an hour and a half from now. The hearing might start as we are doing the live show. So we're going to have to keep our head on a swivel. See if there's any news dropping. There's going to be reporters there. This is a huge deal. Again, we're going to lead off the show going through an article written about the hearing that's set for today. PAC-12 versus PAC-10. Who's going to control the PAC-12 assets, or how much control are each group of schools going to have going forward? I want to touch upon the crazy college football playoffs invitational scenarios that are still alive out there. There was a great article written, Heather Dinich, ESPN. I want to go through that as well, but we might have to cut a little bit of that off. I think we'll go through some of it. We'll go through the article real quick. Still a lot of crazy scenarios out for this late in the year. There's a lot of different scenarios. All 5 Power 5 conferences have a pathway for a team to make it to the 4-team invitational. Even the Big 12. Even the Big 12 with Texas having one loss. There is potential in all 5 Power 5 conferences with only 4 spots. And that hasn't happened for quite a long time. Usually one of the Power 5 conferences have been eliminated from getting a team to qualify for the playoffs. And of course, next year when we have the expanded playoffs, it's going to be exciting. Also, I'm going to end the monologue with yet another, what I would call, major update inside the Holy Smokes Theater when it comes to the ACC drama. Again, not a whole lot of details. I won't be able to put up images of this. I'm going to describe to you the same way we did with the Big 12, Colorado. Before I launch into the update, I'll get everybody caught up on what the theater, inside the theater, looks like. But we have major movement. There's a particular school out there that is making a great effort, making sure that they are part of the future, whether it be in the SEC or the Big Ten. Other people know about this. I'm not going to be able to. I'll be able to describe. There has been some hot bubble of action. Now, if you were with us if you were following Peek Around the Corner in regards to the Big 12 and the Pac-12, and we told you there was a hot bubble of action, you didn't know what that meant at the time between April 28th and May 17th of last year, but you found out what it was Hint, hint. Wink, wink. May 7th in Chicago. There's been a couple of hot bubble of actions with a particular school, and I'm going to tell you what that school is, but then I'm going to have to cut it off at some point. There are other people who know this. This is not exclusive peek around the corner like it was with USC in the Big Ten March 31st of 2022. This is much like the Colorado being at the center of the stage. We knew it. We knew what was going on. Other people knew it too. And eventually they got to be the big articles coming out. There were others who knew what we knew, and they gave you information behind paywalls and stuff. But there is one school in particular that is really, they are very active. And it's not going to come as a surprise to you. There's already been reports on it. But the best I can do today is reinforce to you that there's a particular school in the ACC that's putting out a whole lot of effort. And we'll maybe go through the reasons why. So we've got a stacked show. Before we're going to end the monologue with the Holy Smokes Theater update. We're going to start the monologue, today's monologue, with who controls the Pac-12 after today. Are we going to get some sort of conclusion for today? I think we will. Let me say thanks for everybody coming on in. Hagen, Jim Reese, Bill G, JD Turtle, Randy Taylor, Matt Neeson, thanks for coming on in. Kenneth Stromness, I appreciate you coming on in. David Hackett is in the house. The evil one, the evil badger, Jeff Olson, is in the house. Randy Taylor, Cloak and Dagger, no question about it. No question about it. Go get your Cloak and Dagger mug. Go get it at the merchandise store. The link is in the description. Cloak and Dagger is happening all over the place. And the only way we can cover it is by describing it in the Holy Smokes Theater. It's the one way that I stay out of trouble. It's one way for you to understand the information, especially if you are here from day one. You understand the cues, right? You understand the director of the play. You understand the movement and what it all means. That's the only way we can do it. And hopefully in an entertaining fashion. Thanks for coming on in, Mick Stevens. Appreciate it. Good morning. Good morning to you, Nick Kelso. Appreciate you all coming in. Okay, let's first get to the first story. Again, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. Make sure you get notified because we can come up live anytime. In fact, after this live show in a couple hours from now, we may have to go live again because we may get a decision. Also, there's so many things going on in the Holy Smokes Theater, so you've got to subscribe and notify to get yourself the peek around the corner. If you want to support our channel, hit that $, and I'll make a donation. I'll get you a comment as soon as possible. Let's get to very important day. Holy smokes. Today is man, there's going to be, today could be a very potential big day, not only in the Pac-12 world, but other places in this college football world that we love so much. But let's get into this. Who will control the Pac-12 moving forward? Tuesday, today's hearing could have wide-ranging impacts again, Ross Dellenger of Yahoo Sports. Earlier this month, the Sun Belt Conference presidents gathered for an emergency call to discuss realignment. At the center of the meeting was a proposal from out west. Oregon State, Washington State were interested in a short-term scheduling alliance with the conference. Deliberation didn't take long. The presidents, they were not interested. The Sun Belt presidents. The travel was too far and there was no real financial incentives. However, the proposal from the two remaining Pac-12 programs, Oregon State, Washington State, provides insight into their mad scramble to assemble a football schedule less than 10 months before the 2024 season kicks off. A difficult plight that might be made easier with a court ruling this week today, November 14th. The result of the hearing, set to begin at 2 o'clock Eastern Time, could have wide-ranging impacts. First, on the financial situation at all the Pac-12 schools, not just Oregon State, Washington State, and the next on the future of the Pac-12's existence. As with many aspects in the modern era of the college athletics, the fight is over money. Judge Gary Libey must determine what schools the two remaining members of the All 12 or all 12 control the distribution of the league's millions of dollars in not only future assets but current assets too. Oregon State, Washington State are arguing that they, as the programs not leaving, should be the only voting members on the conference's governing board. The other 10 schools are arguing to keep their voting privileges and thus their cash. The suit at first was believed to center around the more than $100 million in future assets due to the conference in 2024, 2025, and beyond. But according to recent court filings, this makes this day so much more important than it was a couple months ago, in my eyes at least. Maybe not in yours, but in my eyes. But according to recent court filings in the case, current assets, those due to the 12 schools this very academic year, are at stake. That includes roughly $400 million in conference distribution from the 2023-24 academic year, roughly $40 million per school from the league's television deal, the NCAA tournaments, and the Rose Bowl. So it's more than $100 million at stake. It is somewhere around $400 million in conference distribution. Fear of the unknown is rooted in each side's defense. Oregon State and Washington State believe that the other 10 members, if given voting rights on the board, would dissolve the conference, escape the liabilities and legal entanglements in which the league is involved and distribute the revenues to themselves. The other 10 schools believe that Oregon State, Washington State, if given full control of the conference, will keep much of this year's distribution for themselves in an effort to, 1, rebuild the league by financially enticing expansion targets, i.e., Mountain West schools throw in a possible Tulane and the AAC, or paying those targets conference exit fees. Arrange future schedule alliances with financial incentives. And 3, monetarily damage the 10 schools as a penalty for the collapse of the 108-year-old conference. This lawsuit is not just about the Pac-12 future, but also its present, read court documents filed earlier this month by the University of Washington. Whatever Oregon State and Washington State decide to do with the money earned after August 1st, 2024, it is fundamentally inequitable to allow them to take current year revenues and confiscate such revenues and assets in convection of all members' rights to an interest in them. Attorneys briefed on the case expect the judge to make the ruling by the end of the hearing or soon after. So again, sometime this afternoon, there's a very good chance we are going to get the ruling on this. How much control, how much money is Oregon State, Washington State's going to get of that $400 million? Are they going to be the only institutions that are going to have voting rights, therefore have control of the cash? Most believe that Libey has three ruling options. Number one, he could grant Oregon State, Washington State full control of the Pac-12 governance and assets. Number two, he could extend the ruling he made in September that prevents the Pac-12 board from meeting and making any decisions unless there is unanimity. Or number three, he could deny Oregon State, Washington State's motion and rule that all 12 schools have voting rights on the board. So number one, Oregon State, Washington, full control. Number three, he could deny Oregon State, Washington State the motion and rule that all 12s, all equal, all have voting rights. So that's one extreme, number one. Number three is the other extreme. Or number two, he could extend the ruling he made, kick the can down the road. So to me, reading this article, this is not a case of King Solomon, right? Threatening to cut the baby in half to see who the real mother is or whatever. Look, it sounds like the judge in this case going to rule all for Oregon State, Washington State, or all for or ruling that the other 10 schools would have, and that they all have equal voting rights on the board, or this is going to get kicked the can down the road. The 10 departing schools are requesting that Libey modify the preliminary injunction to clarify that Oregon State, Washington State may not use revenues from 23 to 24 to pay for scheduling games, adding members, or any other purposes that don't benefit the exiting 10 schools. In a response filing last week, the Cougars and Beavers disagree. The school's lawyers write that the request from the 10 existing programs to keep their 2023-24 revenues is disappointing but not surprising, and offers no provision for any liabilities that the league incurred while the departing schools were members. And then finally, well, not quite. The Pac-12 is at the center of multiple legal challenges that could eventually cost millions of dollars. The league is a defendant in a case, House versus NCAA, we know about that, over retroactive name, image, and likeness payments and athletes' compensation tied to media rights. All the conferences are involved in that. It is mentioned in the National Labor Relations Board employment case. 2 more lawsuits against the league, one from a former employees and the other from a bowl game, could be costly as well. More pressing than those liabilities is the future conference membership and schedules for Oregon State and Washington State football, as well as other sports. For now, many legal experts believe that the Pac-12's future assets can be retained by the two schools if they preserve the league, at least in the short term. And that, my friends, in the PATC community, is the PATC money shot of this article. Many legal experts believe, now maybe they're wrong. You all know this, I've happened to believe that Washington and Oregon State have a very strong case. It doesn't mean they're going to get the whole ball of wax. It doesn't mean they're going to, win the whole enchilada. But I believe they have a very strong case. I'm sorry, I call it like I see it. Now, a lot of Pac-12 fans of the other 10 schools, I've gotten a few direct messages. They've been coming after me pretty hard. Now, before, Oregon State and Washington State fans came at me pretty hard. Like I say, if I don't upset you at least once during the year, I'm not doing my job. I call it like I see it. I believe Oregon State, Washington State have a pretty good, strong case. Preserving the league, at least in the short term. To me, that means a reverse merger. You bring on the Mountain West schools into the Pac-12. Make it into a Pac-14. That would be preserving the league. Now, back to the article. They are preparing to operate as a two-school conference for at least the next year, even assembling a schedule for the 2024 football season that is akin to an independent school. They are using a 2-year NCAA grace period. Conferences falling before the minimum 8 members are allowed 2 years to return to the 8-member mark before they are no longer recognized as a conference. And finally, end of the article, Oregon State and Washington State, clearly still toying with the idea of rebuilding the conference, have been in discussion with the Mountain West over a scheduling alliance to complete a 12-game slate in the short term, but that comes with strings. The Mountain West wants a more long-term commitment and financial incentives as part of any alliance. That makes sense to me. Mountain West wants to play the long game on this. Can't blame them a bit. That may have led Oregon State and Washington State's proposal to the Sun Belt in an effort to shop around a proposal to complete their schedules. By Tuesday evening, within a Washington County courthouse, the future of the Beavers and the Cougars will be more known, and so too the existence of the Pac-12. There's a lot to chew on there, and we're going to chew on it. We're definitely going to chew on it. Ryan Thomas, thank you so much for your super chat. Thank you so much for your friendship. I appreciate it. The court will not allow the PAC to keep all the distributions for the 23-24 season. That would be in complete violation of the bylaws, and the other 10 can file claim. Likely the two get the IP rights and physical, I'm having a tough time, IP rights and physical assets only. Ryan Thomas, he believes, and so do others, he believes that the distributions for the 23-24 season, that Oregon State and Washington will not be able to keep the whole ball of wax. That goes against the Pac-12 bylaws. Likely the two will get the IP rights and physical assets only. That's from Ryan Thomas. Thank you so much for your super chat. I appreciate it. Thank you so very much for helping us keep the lights on, Ryan. There's a lot to chew on in that article. But I think, first of all, one of the important things is it's very well likely we're going to get a ruling today. That's either going to, there's going to be some happy people, some unhappy people. Now, is there a chance that the judge kicks the can down the road? Sure. But it looks like we're going to get a ruling. Mediation, so far, hasn't worked, didn't help. between the two parties, the 10 schools versus the 2 schools. It's interesting as well in the article, pointed out a couple of different times that Washington State, Oregon State, they got on the line, they called the Sun Belt. Because the Mountain West, sure, they would do a scheduling alliance with Oregon State and Washington State. Sure, Mountain West will do that on one condition. Let's have a long-term partnership. Let's be together. And Oregon State and Washington State, well, they were checking out some other options. That's pretty interesting in the article as well. I don't know. Look, I'm not a lawyer. I only play one on this YouTube channel. You guys all know the fat guy from Minnesota. The elevator, the elevator don't go all the way to the top with me, right? So, but from everything I've read, they do got a pretty strong case. The party members lost their voting rights. So, I know it's more complicated than that. I get it. But I think they've got a pretty strong case. They might not get everything, but maybe they just get the assets. The Pac-12 network. We're going to find out later today. I want to hear other opinions as well. D. Hoggins says the Mountain West is playing this smart. Yes, I think maybe they are. Now, I'm going to get to your comments, phone calls, later on that. I just want to get to the crazy playoff scenarios that is still alive. Then we're going to get to the Holy Smokes Theater major update. It's going to be short on details, but strong on emphasis, right? And I know you're probably a little discouraged by that, but there is one school that is, there's no denying there's one school that is they are being very thorough in this adventure, this venture of looking at possibly leaving the ACC and making sure there's an option for them once they do. Okay, let's get to I'm not going to go through the whole article. We're just going to skim this because I want to get to the Holy Smokes Theater update. But, and this was written this morning. I thought it was yesterday. Anyways, college football playoff chaos scenarios. Heather Dinich. This is not normal. Historically, by mid-November, at least one Power 5 conference has played itself out of the college football playoff race. At this point last season, only the Big Ten, Ohio State, Michigan, and the SEC, Georgia, and Tennessee had teams with at least 33% chance to reach the playoffs, according to the All-State Playoff Predictor. This year, all 5 major conferences are still jockeying for the coveted 4 playoff spots, invitational spots, and there is twice as many teams in contention. Pac-12's Washington's undefeated. 1 loss. Oregon has a legitimate path, no question about it. The Buckeyes and the Wolverines remain undefeated. SEC King Georgia is still undefeated. Undefeated Florida State is carrying the banner for the ACC. And while the Big 12 doesn't have any undefeated teams, you have that 1 loss Texas, and they hold a head-to-head trump card over the 1 loss Alabama. So if Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC championship game. Texas wins the Big 12 championship. What are you going to do? Among those three teams, Alabama would have a conference championship. Texas would have a conference championship. And Georgia would not. Among those three teams, Georgia would be 0-1. Alabama would be 1-1. Texas would be 1-0. Right? We'll skip that. We'll skip that. Two SEC teams. The chances of this could increase if Georgia is the selection committee's number one team tonight, Tuesday night, tonight, and holds that position going into the SEC title game against Alabama. And if they would lose to Alabama, right, that means there would be a chance that Georgia and Alabama would both go to the 4-team playoff invitational, right? If Georgia can get the number one, Alabama beats them in the SEC championship. Georgia fall all the way to number 5. That is one scenario. Again, I'm quickly going through this. Alabama and Texas are left out. Much has been about the importance of the Longhorns' regular season double-digit win at Alabama. But instead of wondering if both get in, consider the opposite real possibility. It could even be a no-brainer for the committee to exclude them both if somebody other than Texas wins the Big 12 and Georgia wins the SEC title. No question about it. If Alabama loses the SEC title game, they're out. If Texas if they don't win the Big 12, of course, they are out. A 2-loss contender. Just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it can't. If Oregon loses to rival Oregon State at home Friday, but still beats Washington to win the Pac-12, don't count the Ducks out until the rest of the Power 5 conference champions are crowned. Think about that. Could Oregon be the one team, because this is the last year of the 4-team invitational, could Oregon be that 1-2-loss team that makes the playoff if they lose to Oregon State Friday, November 24th, but still beat Washington in the Pac-12? They'd slide ahead of Washington? Probably. And if Georgia beats Alabama, Florida State loses, and anybody than Texas wins the Big 12, you could possibly see a 2-loss Oregon. Yes. Is it a little bit of a crazy scenario? Yes, it is. But it's kind of legitimate. 2 Pac-12 teams. This conference has had enough trouble getting one team, let alone 2, but it can happen in the same way that SEC has a chance. Oregon has to beat an undefeated Washington. Washington, 1 loss. Oregon, 1 loss champion. The committee would also consider a 1-loss Washington team that has a regular season win over Oregon, the Pac-12 champion, plus statement wins against Arizona, USC, Utah, Oregon State. It's arguably even a better resume than Georgia if the Bulldogs finish as a 1-loss SEC runner-up. Whole bunch of crazy scenarios. Alabama over a 1-loss Texas. Boy, I would have trouble with this one. A head-to-head result is important, but it isn't everything. In order for this to happen, Alabama has to win the SEC, and the Big Ten has to have an undefeated champion. The Pac-12 champion has to have 1 loss or fewer, and Florida State has to be an undefeated ACC champ. Look, I don't believe a 1-loss Alabama SEC champion would they get over a 1-loss Texas Big 12 champion? I ask you that. Remember, Texas beat Alabama. Double digits in Alabama. Could you really put Alabama over Texas? I don't think so. And then the last scenario, this article goes through 2 SEC teams, 2 Big Ten teams. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm going to just skip by that one. Don't think that's what's going to happen. But anyways, you can check that out. Heather Dinich, ESPN article. I will provide a link in the description box below the video. Let me get to some comments before we get to the big update inside the Holy Smokes Theater. Washington still has to play in Corvallis. Shakar, I know Texas has a head-to-head win, but I do think that Alabama's playing better than the Horns right now. I believe there's a few people who agree with you. Immaculate, if Alabama beats Georgia, there's a reasonable argument for saying they're a much better team than when they lost to Texas early in the season. I tell you what, if that might be all logical and everything, but if that happens, if they take a one-loss Alabama over a one-loss Texas beating Alabama and Alabama, even though it was early in the season, people are going to be hot. People are going to be hot. I think including me as well. That is why one of the many, many, many reasons why I love the 12-team playoffs. Because a game in week 2 should not decide your fate if you improve and dominate the rest of the season and win a great conference like the SEC. But because there's only 4 slots, and Texas beat Alabama in Alabama, I don't see how you can take Alabama over Texas. I don't see it. Tuffy Duffy, America's team, has a nice ring to it.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I'm gonna stay. No, you can call in or put a donation, make a comment about the Michigan stuff. I'll read the comment. We'll do a deep dive if you call in. But this is a no Michigan monologue today. I could be saying a few things right now, but I won't. Shikar is, I'm waiting in line for some nachos at the Holy Smokes Theater. And Tony says, I could see Texas losing again. A little bit of information on Texas here. Pete Thamel this morning. Ewers has been viewed since high school as a 3 and done, but he left high school early and has played only 2 years. An NFL decision won't be made for weeks. Sources, Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers has yet to decide on whether to declare for an NFL draft. There's been early conversations about a potential return to Texas, but there's a long way to go. So, if Quinn Ewers, if he decides to come back next year, Texas, first year in the SEC, what does that do for Arch Manning? Is he willing to sit another year? Is Arch Manning willing to sit another year? I think it would be tough. I think it would be very, very difficult. So the Quinn Ewers decision on whether to go into the 2024 NFL draft in the spring, man, the ripple effects on that decision could be massive. Because I'm going to tell you something. If Arch Manning went into the transfer portal, woo! A lot of people would be calling. A lot of them. And I'm going to tell you one school that would be banging hard on his door, and that's Alabama. Because they were banging hard on his door last time. So, yeah, that is Manning to Tennessee, Market Text. Could be. Okay. Architect, what's the over-under on Tony P running the league after next year? I think he's a huge favorite to be running the league after next year. There is no Tony Petitti's job is safe. Okay. Thanks for the question. Appreciate it. Great for Trojan. The Mannings are thinking long term. There are no hurry to force playing time for Arch. Texas boosters will compensate him enough to stay too. So great for Trojan. Thanks for coming on in, Mr. Trojan. He thinks Manning would stay. Steven Vit says if Ewer stays, Manning is going. John Till, thanks you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it. Manning at Oregon to take over for Bo in the Big Ten. Wow. Now, Oregon has a stud, right? You guys are all excited about, and I forget his name. I keep forgetting his name. You guys have told me 5 different times. You have a stud ready to take over for Bo Nix. Correct? Oregon fans, remind me the guy's name once again. Washington has a stud ready to take over for Michael Penix. Supposedly now, sometimes studs don't pan out. So far, Drew Aller hasn't panned out for Penn State. Bo Nix did not pan out for his first 2 years at Auburn. But then he went to Oregon. Boom, he became a superstar. Absolute superstar. Ty Thompson, not a lot of people believe in him. Oh, okay. Not a lot of people believe in him. Interesting. Okay, so let's buckle in here. Let's buckle in. Again, Holy Smokes Theater. Got to take a drink of my Cloak and Dagger. In some ways, not in some ways, in big ways. In big ways. This has already been reported on. Well, not all of it. But and I'm not telling you, I'm not going to overstep my bounds because I want to be able to harvest the field over and over and over again. Last night, I worked on this story. The chatter has been heavy since about 3 weeks ago. I've reached out to people yesterday. I did not do a live show. I was thinking about it. But I laid low. And I did not want to title the live show this. I put it in the title, but there's a big day happening in Washington today in regards to the Pac-12 future. Then this story doesn't have the details that you like to have when you come on and be part of PATC. Sometimes I give you the details, sometimes I can't. Look, this was the Holy Smokes Theater before November 14th. The Holy Smokes Theater has Florida State and Clemson at the center of the stage, unlike the Big 12. Now, this is the Holy Smokes Theater setup before today. The last time we had a Holy Smokes Theater update. We're just going to go through it so you know what it looks like, what it looked like, and now what it looks like today. And you can take this however you want it. I'm strongly advising you to take it in, to absorb it. Clemson and Florida State both are at the center of the stage. Remember during the Big 12 ACC drama, Colorado was the only team that was at the center of the stage. Arizona was off to the edge. We saw how that worked. Colorado, then Arizona, Arizona State, Utah. But since the last live update, Clemson and Florida State are at the center of the stage. Clemson is there with Florida State. Clemson is there with Florida State. You've seen the public reports. Clemson is there with Florida State. Up on the box, the VIP box, is Phil Collins, the board of trustees, the head of the board, in a VIP box. And the other VIP box next to Collins is Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner. Not in the same VIP box, but the VIP box are connected. In the front row, all alone, is North Carolina. In the fifth row is Notre Dame. Now, somebody sits in front of Notre Dame. Somebody sits in front of Notre Dame. And we'll get to that in a second. In the fourth row. But Notre Dame is in the fifth row. In the sixth row, off to the right side of the theater, the seats on the right side. In the sixth row, near the end of the row, sits NBC, Tony Petitti, and then there is a chair with two blue and white hockey skates sitting next to the chair next to Tony Petitti. In the 15th row is North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, Miami of Florida, and Virginia in the 15th row. There is a little bit of movement on that as well. We'll get to it. That is your Holy Smokes Theater. Up until today, we're giving you an update. Information that we have received starting about a good 3 weeks ago, and there's other people on the hunt on this, so we can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, not who's going where. Oh, and remember the last one was, look, if Notre Dame doesn't pop first, SEC's getting aggressive. The possibility of a clean sweep of Virginia, North Carolina, Clemson, Florida State, the odds have gone up a bit. We're not declaring that that's going to happen. We're not there yet, ladies and gentlemen. We're just saying that SEC's become aggressive, very aggressive. I can tell you who's really aggressive, and that is Clemson. Clemson has been involved in the hot bubble of action at least twice. What's the hot bubble of action? I'm not going to say it on this live show. I think a lot of you, the veterans of PATC, know what I mean. If you want to put it in the chat, you can put in the chat. I cannot stop you from what you put in the chat room. Unless it's hate speech, or if you're ripping on each other too harshly, that I will not allow. You can rip on me, but against each other, no. Hate speech, no. Vulgar speech, no. But if you want to describe to the new people at PATC what the hot bubble of action, that term was used, in the prior breaking stories inside the Holy Smokes Theater, you can do so. Clemson, now I know there's been reports, public report, saying that they hired somebody, a firm, 6 months ago. Now it's probably been 7 months ago. They were looking at their options. They've done a lot of work on it. So this doesn't come as a surprise to anybody. And there was even a report from, I think it was some paper down in South Carolina saying maybe, possibly, something was imminent in regards to Clemson discussing making it known in public that they were open to making their indications, letting everybody know that they are looking to leave the ACC in regards to an ACC settlement or some other way of circumventing the ACC gore, whatever that may be. We think the odds are for a potential settlement. Either way, all that is known. But what has been quite apparent, starting about 3 weeks ago in October, right around the last time we did the last live, when we put Clemson in the center of the stage. That was about the start of it. Clemson is apps. Now you can say this about Florida State if you want, but I want to emphasize something here. Clemson is 100% determined to get out of the ACC. This we never picked up on this here at Peek Around the Corner. I mean, we know we got the public reports. We get it. But behind the curtain, they are absolutely 100% determined to get out of the ACC. The board members, as we've talked about, are not saying it in public. But the money people and administrative people are saying it in silence. But they are talking. They are talking. Now, Greg, how do you know this? Well, we knew that USC called the Big Ten because the leak came out in March when we broke that story. The leak came out of Los Angeles, not from the Big Ten offices. It rarely does. The leak came out of Los Angeles, a donor. A senior administrator told a donor, and that baby spread like hot fire. Not where reporters were going to talk about it or even knew about it, but where the people that I talked to knew about it. The Colorado thing, same thing. Kind of. Different story. Donors are talking. Now, donors are either just talking because they want to talk, or they're trying to push a message, or they just want somebody to hear them out, or whatever. There's a lot of motivations. But we've been able to ascertain that at least some of the stuff that's being told to us is absolutely true. Clemson is absolutely determined. And they might even be further down the road in regards to, well, let me just say this. They have more of an incentive to leave the ACC. Their perception is, from the people who've talked to BTM and his associates, that they are more incentivized to leave the ACC to be in the Big Ten. To leave the ACC to be in the Big Ten or the SEC by 2027. They're more incentivized than Florida State. They're more incentivized than North Carolina. They have more. They don't talk as much, but they have at least as much energy or more to get this done, to figure out how to get done, to defer the payments of the settlement from years out. This is their window. This is their window. They don't think they can afford to wait. They have the great brand. They don't have the great market. This is coming from them. They know that the world is changing so much. We just heard Florida State's president say, if all this happens, Florida State president just said this in the November 10th, Florida State now. I'm switching over. I'll get back to Clemson. When Florida State President Richard McAuliffe, he just said, and I'm paraphrasing, the world is changing. College football, as we know, is going to be gone, destroyed. I'm not sure what word he used. When they're talking about revenue sharing. That's all that these athletic directors and presidents are thinking about when it comes to the front porch of the universities. Revenue sharing is dictating all their decisions. You got to have the revenue, or you got to know you're going to have the revenue 4, 5, 6 years from now. You have to have it, or you're going to drop off the table. If you don't have it, then you're not going to be able to challenge at the very elite level for college football and possibly even some other sports, maybe basketball. But football drives all this. Clemson feels like they're getting absolutely squeezed. They have money behind them, but they have great money behind them. Don't get this twisted, but they don't have the bigger schools' money behind, when it comes to the elite schools, the blue blood schools, the big helmet schools. They don't have the market. They have a new big brand, no question about it. But they feel that they have to squeeze in this window of time. They've got to get in while they have value to the Big Ten or the SEC. They are going for it. Now, all this sounds exactly the same way if you want to talk about Florida State, but Clemson even feels more desperate. Now, last night I'm working on the story, trying to decide, should I talk about Clemson? We'll make the adjustments in the Holy Smokes Theater in a second. Reached out to new people. Not new people. Reached out to people who I know, but haven't reached out to them. We talked about a Florida State first quarter of 2024. Remember, we were told by a Florida State money perch, December 26, 2022. First quarter 2024, Florida State's going to make it known. We reported that December 26, 2022. How many weeks away are we at the start of the first quarter of 2024? 7 weeks away? 6, 7 weeks away? Clemson's right in that same spot. First quarter, 2024. Earlier today, again, this is just a story. Look, Dabo Swinney, asked Dabo Swinney if he had any interest in the Texas A&M job opening. No, I haven't gotten to who's in front of Notre Dame. We got a ways to go yet. That's why I had to go through the crazy playoff scenarios as quick as possible. Chapel Fowler said, asked Dabo Swinney if he had any interest in the Texas A&M job opening. I'm just focused on this job. Always have been. Just trying to beat North Carolina. It must be November. That's all I can say. This actually plays right into what Clemson perceives themselves to be. Dabo Swinney can easily, now a lot of Clemson fans will tell you, Dabo Swinney can go, he can go. Dabo Swinney has been very, very important to Clemson, obviously. Not multiple national championships, but they could lose a Dabo Swinney like that, right, to Texas A&M. So could pretty much everybody else. But the point of this is Clemson in 3 or 4 years from now, in 5 years from now, in 6 years from now, they will not be able to be, they won't, when it comes to head coaches, assistant coaches, and most importantly, the football players, student athletes, Clemson feels they will not be able to be in the game. They won't be able to be in the game, even more than Florida State. Clemson has not had a very good year this year, but that does not influence the brand that they have. But 6 years from now, 5 years from now, waiting until 2028, 2029, Clemson feels that they do not have that option. The money gap is going to be just too great between them and the SEC teams and the Big Ten teams. This is just, Clemson does not feel, they're even, the word desperation is being used. They are desperate. Even though they're a great football program, they want to stay at the elite. They want to be able to compete. And they see it slipping away. And the pure inertia of this. Clemson is out in front of this. Not vocally, not out in public. Now, there was a couple of public reports, no question about it, saying Clemson has done the work. I'm telling you, they've done the work and they've had at least 2 hot bubble of action moments with potential landing spots. Indirect talks. Getting more information on what their value is perceived by others. I am putting PATC, the Holy Smokes Theater. We are putting Clemson in that first quarter of 2024 watch along with Florida State. Equal, together. They may not make the same decisions together. They may not do it the same way, but they're in the hot spot along with Florida State. We talked about Florida State's smoke being real in August. There's fire burning at Florida State. We can say the same thing about Clemson without any doubt. Having said that, we know that NBC is sitting next to Tony Petitti in the 6th row. We know Notre Dame is sitting in the 5th row. We know North Carolina is in the 1st row. And for the first time ever in the ACC drama, Fox has now entered into the theater. They're sitting in the 4th row. ESPN, for the first time ever in any Holy Smokes theater, has entered in to the theater, and they're sitting next to Fox in the 4th row, in front of Notre Dame. That's how hot this has gotten. Now you're going to ask me a question, and we're moving Virginia 1 row up in front of Virginia Tech, in front of Miami of Florida, in front of North Carolina State. We're going to have Virginia sitting in the 14th row. That's another change. Small change, minor change, could be significant change. ESPN and Fox are in the front row. There's been many, many questions asked. Greg. The grant of rights. Greg, you have been a strong, firm. You've been saying it for years that the grant of rights, you can't just go and break it. I agree. I've said this for years. I agree. Unless there was some secret communication passed to Florida State or Clemson where there was promise of some sort of considerations and they didn't receive them by the ACC. Yeah, I don't know a pathway to breaking it. A settlement, though, that's, I think, where this is going. Again, we shall see. First quarter of 2024, we're almost there. And if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, if you would have asked me December 26, 2022, who was going to be the first school to come out and say their declaration that they're leaving the ACC, that their intention is to leave the ACC, that their intention is to take it to court or make a settlement with the ACC, I would have said Florida State. I've been saying Florida State is the tip of the spear. I no longer believe that. It can be Florida State or Clemson, probably right together, probably one right after the other. But Clemson has had indirect talks with people who have interest with the SEC and the Big Ten. And that's as far as I can go with it. I don't think I pissed anybody off. People who know me, they know that they knew that I was only going to go this far. So I think we're safe. Is somebody going to write an article saying that somebody representing Clemson has met with somebody representing another conference? That very well could happen. I'm not going to write an article, and we'll wait to see what happens next. But all this is as serious as possibly could be. That's where we really, ladies and gentlemen, we really needed to update the Holy Smokes Theater because we're going to have another update. And we couldn't go from what we had to what's going to happen next without this. ESPN and Fox are in the theater. That means something. They're sitting ahead of Notre Dame. And Clemson is at the center of the stage where they were weeks ago, but they're on the equal plane as Florida State. A lot of motivation in Clemson. A lot of motivation. They feel like Florida State is what was told to us. Like, Florida State, they can survive a little bit longer. They have their own university in Florida. They're not going to... The shadow of Florida and Miami, Florida doesn't cast over Tallahassee so much in that market where they are and with that brand. But Clemson feels that they could get buried. in the next 3, 4, 5 years. Now, maybe Clemson fans are upset with me, and that's fine. I get everybody upset with me. I'm just, or maybe they're happy because I'm letting them know that yes, Clemson is doing everything possible that they can legally do to make sure about what's the best pathway, what's the best landing spot. So maybe some Clemson fans are mad at me, some are happy with me. I'm just giving you the straight shoot. And for those who think none of this is happening, I don't know. I can't show you a photo or all I can go by is the history, the credibility, how we've introduced stories to you all before, giving you a peek around the corner, not just the USC, but other stories that have happened. Clemson is absolutely 100% determined to get out and to be playing in a different conference by at least 2027. Let me get to a couple of super chats. I'll get to the rest of the comments. We'll get to your phone calls as soon as possible. Ryan Thomas, thank you so much again for your super chat. I appreciate it. Cheat again. Weezerines have camera in the theater. No, this was not about Michigan. Thank you, Ryan Thomas. Appreciate your super chat. John Teal, can ACC leftovers click up with Oregon State, Washington State, and Mountain West Conference? I think we're a long ways away from that, and probably not. I think ACC eventually is going to remain a conference and probably remain an autonomy conference. But let's take this one step at a time. Thank you, John, for your super chat. I appreciate it. Tony, last Thursday, Disney announced they'll be cutting $2 billion more in spending. Do you think this will be a factor in any potential SEC expansion? You know what? I don't really think so. The reason I say that, now, we just had ESPN come into the theater for the very first time ever. But I got a feeling that at some point in time, the SEC is going to expand again. No question. With ACC schools, no question. Could it be 2 or 4? That's a question. Could it be more? That's a question. But I think at some point the SEC, ESPN brings on a partner, a digital partner, when it comes to the exposure of the SEC. But that's years down the line. So, not saying they become exactly like the Big Ten where they have 3 major networks and all that, but I think the days of SEC just being on the family of ESPN, those days are probably numbered. A few years down the road. Thanks, Tony. Appreciate super chat. Thank you so very much for all the super chat. Great donations. Thank you for helping us keeping the lights on. Again, if you want to have your comment put up as soon as possible, little donation, help us keep the lights on. Appreciate it so very much. Both sets of money have entered the theater? Yes. What is the hot bubble of action? That's being answered in the chat right now as we speak. What is the hot bubble of action? That's being answered in the chat right now as we speak. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16 17 18 19 20 21 22 23 24 25 26 27 28 29 30 31 32 33 34 35 36 37 38 39 40 41 42 43 44 45 46 47 48 49 50 51 52 53 54 55 56 57 58 59 60 61 62 63 64 65 66 67 68 69 70 71 72 73 74 75 76 77 78 79 80 81 82 83 84 85 86 87 88 89 90 91 92 93 94 95 96 97 98 99 100 101 102 103 104 105 106 107 108 109 110 111 112 113 114 115 116 117 118 119 120 121 122 123 124 125 126 127 128 129 130 131 132 133 134 135 136 137 138 139 140 141 142 143 144 145 146 147 148 1 Morning Vision, Virginia has political power that is worth its weight in gold. Okay, we're going to get to your phone calls right now. Right now with your phone calls. Hold on, everybody. Hold on. We are 9 minutes away. 9 minutes away from the hearing in the state of Washington. It's going to start in 9 minutes. What happens in that hearing? Let me know. 763-260-1333. The phone lines is now open. Give us a call. Talk about anything in college football. Talk about the games that are coming up. We went through playoff scenarios, crazy playoff scenarios early in the monologue. We talked about the hearing in the state of Washington, PAC-12 versus PAC-10, what's going to happen. We could very well get the answer. Even before the end of this live show, probably not. But if it's a big time answer, we're going to have to come up on live again here at Peek Around the Corner. How much control of the money, of the assets, are the Oregon State, Washington State going to have after today?
Call from
Kansas State fan.
Kansas State fan. Thanks for calling, sir. The floor is yours.
Wow, there's just a lot of hints that just dropped on me with just the Holy Smokes Theater and
Yes.
and the lawsuit stuff happening out west. It's crazy times, and now you're also dealing with coaching carousel just coming in full force. I'm dizzy. I am incredibly dizzy.
Yes.
Geez, I don't know where to start. Oh man, I can't.
Go ahead. Take a moment.
I just lost my train of thought, so I may have to call you back here in a little bit.
No problem. Happens to me all the time.
Absolutely. All right, I'll be back.
Got it. You got it. Not a problem. It happens to me. It happens to me all the time. That is one of the reasons why I have a notebook here, another notebook here, another notebook here. I have to keep writing notes over and over and over again to make sure, because when you guys call, I like to write down what you're saying so I don't lose my, or I take notes of what I'm thinking constantly on this show. I keep having to tell the little general, I need another notebook. Because I can't keep it all up here, unfortunately. Those days are gone. I never really had those days. Anyways, the phone lines are open. 763-260-1333. Again, we had some news. Quinn Ewers might not be leaving Texas. He has yet to decide whether to declare for the NFL draft. And if he does come back, what happens with Arch Manning? A lot of people in the chat says he's going to stay. Greg, he'll stay another year. He's got no problem. Some are saying that he will not stay. If I had to wage your money on it, people in the PATC community, I would bet against him staying, but we shall see.
Call from
Mowing.
To
The
accept,
floor is
press
yours.
1. To send a voicemail, press.
Mr. Buckeye, the floor is yours, sir.
Good afternoon, Greg. I just wanted to take some time. I see a lot of people asking why UVA would be a Big Ten school. I don't think people realize how much influence the University of Virginia has sway over Washington, D.C. A lot of UVA graduates immediately matriculate to the Washington, D.C. political machine. So all these congressmen and whatnot you see there, their pages, their interns, all these guys are UVA graduates for the most part. It also has one of the most outstanding law programs in the United States. So there's a lot of things that you get out of UVA. Yeah, they're not very good at football. We can all agree on that. But you can't have everybody have a winning football program in your conference.
Yeah. I know that.
UVA is like a Northwestern. We need those lawyers. We need those politicians too.
Yeah.
And UVA is chock full of putting people in power. So, and they're old money, very old money, which, you know, plays well in the Big Ten. The Big Ten loves old money. And they're very close with UNC. So, I mean, they've got a lot of good things going for them, and some having their best friend UNC coming along with them is just another bonus in the book. I mean, it lets them feel like they have a partner in it, and it gets us UNC, which is ultimately as far as I'm concerned, the crown jewel of realignment at this point, is who gets UNC. I know Florida State and Clemson are bigger football brands, but UNC is what the Big Ten's wanted. Before we got Maryland, we wanted UNC. And UNC declined. And then UVA declined. And we ended up with Maryland. So this is a chance for us to go back and get what we wanted from when we added Maryland and Rutgers, and that's getting UNC and UVA in one fell swoop. So I do think Notre Dame does decide to join the Big Ten. I think that they're being pushed in such a way that they can't avoid it. Mm-hmm. These schools are leaving the ACC anyway, whether Notre Dame does or not.
Yeah.
Notre Dame just gives them the easiest path. So if the ACC is no longer a relevant, reliable path for Notre Dame, they're going to have to partner up with another conference. And in order for that to be the Big Ten, they're going to have to become full members. So I thought they might try and stick it out with the ACC, but I can't imagine if ACC loses teams like Florida, Clemson, North Carolina, Virginia, possibly Virginia Tech and North Carolina State. You can't have a conference with Notre Dame, Stanford, Cal, SMU, Syracuse, Pittsburgh. Nobody's going to take it as a serious conference. You're essentially making it a G5 conference. We're going to have a Power 3 structure and a G5 at that point, or a G6 at that point. So I don't know. I think Notre Dame does leave. I think Notre Dame leaves in enough time that UNC and UVA can get to the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten takes a school from Florida, probably Miami, and then they'll pause at 22. They want to leave a slot open for a Texas team. And one more. And I don't know who the one more is. No. I thought it might be Georgia Tech, although I know you don't like Georgia Tech. But the Texas team, I still think it's Texas A&M. I think at the end of the next media deal, Texas A&M might say, hey, we came to the SEC to get away from Texas. You brought them back in here without getting our feedback. Screw you, we're going. And if there's a spot for South Carolina in the Big Ten, South Carolina might do the same if you put Clemson in there. There's enough bad blood. And on the dark horse candidate, I would put Pitt in there as well. I know Penn State's not going to be crazy about the idea, but Pitt checks a lot of boxes for the Big Ten.
All right, man. Can I ask you a question about the Buckeyes?
Yeah, well, we're only going to play you for one half, Greg.
That's fine.
That's all you got to worry about.
That's fine. Well, I will gladly walk on that field and get the Gophers off the field so we don't cripple ourselves, so we can play Wisconsin and win the Axe the following week. Devin Brown, is he I heard that he kind of re-injured himself during warm-ups last Saturday. Is he gonna be ready for Michigan for the game? Because, you know, who's in back of McCord and Devin Brown? Who's the third guy?
That's Lincoln Kleinholz.
Okay. Oh, well, he's yeah.
Yeah, he's number 3. He hasn't played yet. I think they're going to try and redshirt him.
Yeah.
But he would be the number 3 that would be behind Devin Brown.
Okay. I mean, is Brown going to be okay, or because, you know, McCord? I think McCord's kind of nicked up too, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a little nicked up on his ankle, but it shouldn't be anything that's pressing.
Okay.
McCord actually looked best. He's looked all season last weekend.
Yes. Yeah.
Granted, it was only for a half, but
Yeah.
I think they're finally figuring out how to scheme around Kyle as opposed to trying to get Kyle to fit into their scheme. Quick passes, things like that. But next year, who knows? I mean, they might go get a quarterback in the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Entirely possible with if Chip Kelly, I mentioned this on my show yesterday, if Chip Kelly gets ousted at UCLA, I think Dante Moore jumps back in the portal.
Yeah.
Carson Beck at Georgia, who knows if Dylan Raiola wants to stick around?
Yeah.
Who knows if he wants to stick around and wait another year? He might want to play right now. He might be back in play for Ohio State. So,
Yeah.
And then we got Aaron Noland coming in next season. So, yeah, I know you probably don't want to hear me ramble on about all the quarterback prospects we have. Well, you've got the Greek Rifle and Austin Clackamanus. But you know, you might get some of our guys in the portal too. You never know.
That'd be great. That'd be fantastic. I appreciate it.
Devin Brown might jump in the portal at the end of the season. You might have a shot at Devin Brown.
There we go.
All right, Greg. Have a good afternoon.
All right, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Great call, Mr. Buckeye. I've got a question for West Virginia fans. So what's going on with all this lovey-dovey talk with the Mountaineer fans and Jimbo Fisher? What's going on there? I know Jimbo Fisher, a son of West Virginia. What's going on there? Neil Brown, it looks like West Virginia is going to be having a decent record at the end of the year. If they can get another regular season win, maybe a bowl game. I know Jimbo Fisher now is out in the clear. He's not going to be looking for a whole lot of cash. He's got $75 million coming to Jimbo Fisher. None of it gets mitigated. None of it, there is no offset. In other words, if Jimbo Fisher, whatever job he takes next, that salary does not take away from what Texas A&M owes Jimbo Fisher. So Jimbo Fisher, he would take a $4 million a year job. I think so. Why not? $4 million, $4.5 million. He's going to get paid. He's going to get some upfront money from Texas A&M, and I think for the next so many years, he's going to get $7.29, $7.75, something like that, $1 million a year for many, many years. So, you know, it's not going to cost a Power 5 program an arm and a leg to get Jimbo Fisher if you want him. Does West Virginia want Jimbo Fisher? Because I think, obviously I don't know, but I would think Jimbo would be interested. Why not? Why not? One more contract. One more coaching contract to stack on top of what he's getting for Texas A&M. Go back home to West Virginia. Yeah, you're going to have some pressure. Mountaineer fans, they, like most fans, but they dream big, right? They want to be up at the top of the new Big 12. Are we going to see it, Jimbo Fisher and West Virginia? Is it finally going to happen? The son of West Virginia coming back, coaching the Mountaineers? Let me know in the comment section or with your phone calls. I tell you what, if it happens, maybe I'll sing Country Roads. I've sang it once on the show before. Or maybe a couple times. I don't remember. Not that anybody enjoyed it, but I did sing it. Okay.
Call from
Steve.
Steve, Mr. Bearcat, the floor is yours. How you doing, sir?
Good, Greg. How are you?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
Good. Question. In the theater, I'm trying to visualize. ESPN and Fox aren't sitting side by side, right? They're at both one end of that row, right?
Yeah. They're both in the in the fourth row.
Okay.
They're not sitting next to each other. Yeah.
All right, because if they were sitting next to each other, then we got a big story.
Yeah, you're right. I should have made that. Thank you.
No, I
Yeah.
just thought maybe I missed what Greg said.
Yeah. There's
You
no
know, I just
coordination.
wanted to clear it up in my own mind.
No coordination. Yes. Thank you for clearing that
Yeah.
up.
Well, no, I like I said, I tried to clear it up in my own mind.
Well-
because I thought I missed what you said.
Yeah.
So, my next question: if Clemson and Florida State in the first quarter of the year say, "Okay, we think we got all our ducks in a row. Here's our next plan of action," and it starts moving as fast as things moved with the, and I know it's two different scenarios, but
Yeah.
as fast as things moved with the PAC, what's that do to Notre Dame, Greg? I mean, what's their move? I know the NBC thing still is what it is, but what does Notre Dame do?
I think, well, you know, I've said from the beginning the walls are closing in on Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So, and I think if there's any announcements by the ACC schools, which we think is going to happen in the first quarter of 2024, then you know, I mean, Notre Dame, I think the walls get even closer on them. I don't see how they can do this. Keep doing this with independence.
Yeah. And I don't mean to make this sound mean or hateful, but sooner or later, aren't they going to have to put their pride aside and quit carrying the banner of we're an independent and we've got as much power as every conference?
Yeah, I think the problem. Okay, so we're in the situation where there's a whole bunch of changes coming, right? We've been through a bunch of change, Steve. As you know, you've been there from the beginning. We've seen all this change. But the thing is, even more is coming. More and more of it. The big component of it, but not the only component, but the big component is revenue sharing. The other component is these conferences are going to get a whole lot more power. And the revenue sharing part of it and the conferences having power, none of that fits into the vision of Notre Dame remaining called independent football program. And
yeah, right.
So you can kind of squint and kind of see Notre Dame, 2, 3, 4 more years as an independent. That can kind of happen. But once you think 10 years down the road, it becomes almost impossible to see Notre Dame being able to maintain that, in my strongly held opinion.
Yeah. I differ a little bit with that when you give a timeline of 7 or 10. I differ a little bit where I think this thing will get on the fast track once one or two institutions make their move. I don't want to call it domino effect, but I kind of see it as that. Am I?
No, I think you're right. I was just saying I'm not looking at that timeline either.
Okay.
I was just saying if you squint, you can kind of see the possibility. But even beyond that, you don't. So why not? Why won't? In my estimation, Notre Dame should probably plan for its future right now instead of waiting. But
yeah. Okay, final question. Let's say this all happens by 2026.
Mm-hmm.
Playoff, the new playoff model, whatever. Probably going to be 12 teams. We don't know if it'll be 8 teams or 16 teams. They're using the next 2 years kind of as a trial run, right?
Yes, sir. Yep.
So when everything would get settled, as much as it could be settled at that time, what does the Big 12, what position are they in when it comes to being behind the Big 10 and the SEC by a pretty good margin? In revenue.
Mm-hmm.
What's the Big 12? What's it going to look like for the Big 12? I guess is my question.
Well, I think first of all, what's it going to look like for the Big 12? I'm not talking about the gap, but the Big 12 is going to be in the game. They've assured that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge, huge moment for the Big 12. And they're going to be fighting every stick, They're going to be trying to increase the value of the conference for the next media rights deal. They're going to try to deliver the best numbers they possibly can to their current media partners, ESPN and Fox. And if they do, if the numbers are there, then the next media contract, they may shrink the gap with SEC.
Yeah. And they'll just stay where, basically till the next media deals come about.
Yes.
They can survive is what your opinion is.
Yeah, I mean, the advantage, the money gap advantage hasn't even really begun yet. That's one of the things.
Right.
But it's gonna. I mean, SEC is gonna start making that money next year. Big Ten already has, but then when this revenue sharing world gets created, that's when the money gap, the advantages really start to happen. But you know what, Steve? We all, unless we are the elite of the elite, most of us are fighting a money gap anyways, right?
Yep.
So when you're talking about a school,
you try to figure it out.
Yeah, you try to figure it out. Talking as a Gopher fan, we had one great year, 2019. maybe 2029 we have another good year. But a lot of us are in the same spot. The problem is we're all in the same. Most of us are in the same spot when it comes to being able to compete at the highest for a football national championship.
Sure.
Some schools are be able to easily pay their bills easier, and that'd be like a Minnesota because they're going to make a lot of money. But the problem is the schools like Clemson, like Florida State, where they expect to compete at the highest rung. Their donors are spending money their expectations is for you to be able to compete at the highest rung, right? I'm sorry. I love my University of Minnesota, but our donors don't have that expectation, right?
Yeah.
First of all, they're not spending the money like these others. They don't have the expectations. Right. And most schools, most donor class are in that same egg. But Florida State and Clemson are not. So all that pressure, I'm not going to be donating to this NIL, or I'm not going to be donating if you are not competing. The same thing happened to USC. That's why they're called the Big Ten. That's why the donors knew about it, because they were telling USC, I'm not going to double dip for an NIL. and then double dip for you at USC when you're $35 million behind Indiana every year.
Yep.
Florida State and Clemson are having that same conversations.
Well, I'll use my Cincinnati perspective, like you used your Minnesota perspective. Cincinnati's making more money than they ever thought they'd be making.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And they'll put it to good use, and hopefully, they can hang in there and be competitive within the Big 12 or whatever. But I see what you're saying. Expectations are different at different places.
Yeah.
And I get that. So
now, and just for an example, now the donors that give to the University of Minnesota hockey teams, their expectations is you better win it. You better win the whole damn thing. And of course they haven't been. They've been getting beat in the national championship game because good things don't happen to the maroon and gold. But that's what I'm saying. But of course football is, 300 times more valuable and everything. So that's where all the real pressure's at. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm interested, and here again I'm sounding like a broken record that I'm just interested to see what happens with Notre Dame and NBC, because I think that holds a lot of what could happen in the future here in the next year or two.
Yeah.
So with that, Greg, I will let you go.
Got it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Great call. Right. Steve, Mr. Bearcat. Okay, so let's get back to your comments. The phone lines are wide open. 763-260-1333. We start now. Keep in mind, the hearing has already begun.
Call from
Immaculate.
Immaculate is on the line. Mr. Hawkeye, the hearing has begun in the state of Washington.
Did it?
It started at 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central. It's 1:19 right now.
I thought it was 2 o'clock Pacific time is what it was shown as.
Oh, really? Am I wrong again? Okay, I'll take another look. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. I hate to bring you that kind of bad news if you're hoping for that to be live on this show, but you're going to have a long show for that.
Got it. All right. There will not be that for the breaking news during your call.
Yeah, I felt safe to call.
Got it.
I'm glad Moen called, because basically everything he said about Virginia is how I feel about it from a Big Ten perspective. Most people don't look at them and go, well, how good are they for this? The Big Ten doesn't. They look at other things, shall we say, besides just what have you done lately. It's a little bit more of a political conference. It's a little bit more of a research conference. It's a little bit more of what connections do you have. We have the money and we have the network deals now to get you the money you need to build your program. And quite frankly, Virginia was supposed to be a lot better at this point than they are right now, but they had a bad event happen there that has derailed them a little bit. I think everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But we have seen some glimpses even this year as to how good they could have been. And I do think that they are going to get a lot better. They've certainly done that with their basketball program, which you can do much more quickly than football. So they are showing the desire to do it. Whether people want to believe that or not, that's up to them entirely. But if, the UNC says to the Big Ten, you're not getting us without Virginia, then Big Ten's like, yeah, we're fine with that. I feel very strongly about saying that. I don't know if you disagree or not. I'm pretty sure Moen agrees with that. So, and people wondering why Virginia, it's all of it, all of the above. In terms of the big picture, I see some people in chat now starting to go much bigger. They're starting to see things come together. They're starting to think where this is going. And I see a lot of the talk, once again, that these conferences are going to leave the NCAA. Let me remind everyone that the NCAA manual about everything that it, lords over and rules over is something like, 200 plus pages long?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think these conferences want to get in the business of doing all that little, I was almost going to say a bad word, but that little stuff.
No, I understand it. Yep.
I don't think they really want to get into that. The best situation for them is to get full autonomy within the NCAA so that the NCAA takes care of all of that crap and the conferences can just focus on doing the sports side of things, because there's a lot that the NCAA does. There's reasons why it moves so slow. Anyways, that's why I say the House versus NCAA court case that is now looks like it's not going to be looked at until January 2025. So there is a lot of time for a settlement to come through. The NCAA is going to need an angel investor. They're going to need someone to cover that cost. And they only have one thing to offer in return, and that is a vote. So who wants a vote from the NCAA full body for something? That would be the autonomous conferences wanting full autonomy. And with them and their investors and everyone else who would set to make money in this, you might think $4 billion is a lot, but when you can parse that out over, 20 years, it's not. Especially when you're looking to make $2+ billion a year just off of the CFP money in the future. So, for people who are thinking that's still the case, this big picture, remember, the NCAA does an awful lot that it doesn't get credit for. And maybe it shouldn't, because it's still a big mess. But I don't think any of these conferences really want to take that on themselves. And they would have to if they separated from the NCAA. So, like that, very interesting to see what you're saying in terms of who's where. I'm always paying very close attention to that, because you seem to find this stuff out. You've been right over and over again.
Well, it's, and again, we're not the only ones who are observing this. And I don't want to rip on this show. I don't want to say that we have so much lower standards than other college football reporters, but we can kind of sometimes say things that,
sure.
You know what I'm saying? And,
yeah, you can, because you don't have a boss lording over you.
There's nothing here, guys. The only the thing that keeps us, I want to keep harvesting the field, so I don't want to lose access to the people I talk to. So there's a limit to what I can go with, and then I have to stop. And there is other details that we could talk, that we know about, but we can't get into right now. Just just consider it a heads up. Let's put it that way. Clemson, you're not going to hear this, Immaculate. And I'm not saying anybody was thinking differently anyways, but this is you're not going to hear this. You're not going to hear the following. First quarter 2024, Florida State, Mike Alford, the president, stands up in front of the mic and says, "We're declaring our intentions to leave the ACC because reasons A, B, C, D. The future in college sports is changing. This is how we're going to do it." And then Clemson doesn't come up to the mic. That's what you're not going to see. This is not a Florida State. I'm not saying that anybody was thinking that, but I'm just putting it out there. We have more information that says Clemson is right there, even maybe more desperate than Florida State.
I agree. Go ahead, sorry. I would say that because of Dabo's kind of weakness this year, I think they have to look at this and say maybe there's no other school in the ACC that is more tied to success on the field as for their value in realignment than Clemson is. And that is unique because that's generally I say, well, success on the field is nice, but it's not the main thing that's really being looked at. But with Clemson, I do believe it is. And, it's the stadium, it's the atmosphere, it's the value of them to the networks. But, if they're set for a downswing, if Dabo does leave, they could be looking at a few years of downward trending, and that directly impacts their value, in my opinion. People might disagree, and I could be wrong.
No, I think you said it a lot better than I said it. I think the words you choose is they're more heavily tied to the success of their football program than pretty much all the other ACC schools. You're absolutely correct, and I do not. You said it a lot better than I said it.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily just unique within the ACC, but kind of in realignment in general. That's why when people say, "Oh, Clemson might be going to the Big Ten," it kind of blows my mind. That's not possible, is it? But as I talk about UNC wouldn't go to the Big Ten without UVA, maybe FSU would say the same thing. We're not going to go without Clemson. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then that's how they could get it. But I do think that them and Florida State are pretty much shoo-ins for the SEC. But I can see how as time goes on, if there was a downward trend in Clemson, the SEC might slow up on that and say, whoa. And you might at the same time see a Georgia Tech rising up there in Atlanta, Georgia. And they might look at that and say, if we're going to take a second school in a state that we're already in, Florida State makes sense, but Georgia Tech's on the rise and Clemson's on the downswing and Georgia Tech is in Atlanta. I think we're better off maybe blocking anyone else from taking Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're Clemson, I totally believe you, and I think I'd believe it even if you didn't say it,
mm-hmm.
that Clemson, while they may not resort to the same tactics as Florida State, but they want out just as badly. And I don't even think that they would want to go to the Big Ten. Maybe if the SEC said no and forever no, well then maybe. But I don't think anyone at that school or any donors or alumni or anything from there would truly want to join the Big Ten over the SEC if they had a choice. So
yeah.
And but do you think that the SEC could grab Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and Virginia, and that's all that happens?
No. No.
Yeah, because the states of Virginia and North Carolina would raise a fit, right?
No, it would. I would. No, I don't think that's all that would happen because I think the Big Ten then would have. I think Notre Dame has to make the decision to join the Big Ten, in my opinion, and then probably in Miami, Florida. In regards to Virginia and North Carolina leave and what happens with North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, at the very least, it's not going to be pretty. And at the very most, something's going to happen for North Carolina State, Virginia Tech. Where it happens on the spectrum of those two extremes, I don't know. At the very least, it's not going to be pretty, though. We're talking California, UCLA probably stepped up a few notches. So
I'd say I would be worried about what happened when Texas and Texas A&M tried to leave the Southwest Conference to join the Big Eight, and what the state did to them by saddling them with Texas Tech and Baylor. That's pretty much the exact same situation where you start to make this move, you start to do all the work in it, all the effort, and then boom, Virginia and North Carolina come in and say, no, that's not happening unless you take Virginia Tech and North Carolina State with you. And so now you're in the middle of this process. You've already, gone into it. You've got costs involved, everything you've done, and then now you're held up. And at that point in time, SEC has to look at this and go, with ESPN say, fine, okay, we'll take Virginia Tech and North Carolina State too. I think that's the worry. That's a big worry for the SEC is that you can get halfway into that process and it's going to get held up, and you're going to get saddled with Virginia Tech and North Carolina State too, which is 6 teams, which puts them at 22 schools. I think, honestly, if I'm the SEC, I'd almost rather be like, you know what, they can have UNC and Virginia. We'll take North Carolina State and Virginia Tech and be at 20 rather than 22, with, doubled up in Virginia or in North Carolina. I could be wrong on that. Maybe they absolutely want UNC and Virginia so much that they'd be willing to do that. I don't know. Maybe some SEC folks would know better on that.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, the value for them is in blocking the Big Ten out of Florida State. Period.
Yeah.
Like that's what this is really about. And
I think you're onto something.
Oh.
I think that's why the SEC's gotten so much more aggressive here.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a fear, man. I mean, Tallahassee is so close to just everywhere.
Yes.
Georgia, Alabama.
Yeah.
Not that Mississippi. Day's drive from New Orleans. Like the entire heart of the SEC territory would be open to the Big Ten. So, yeah, I totally believe that the SEC has changed gears at this point in time.
Yeah.
Just last thing, and then we'll let you go. In terms of Notre Dame, I think the longer some of this courtroom drama in other directions goes, I think the longer they can last. But if we start to see some cracks happening, like, I'll say it again, I know it's kind of crazy talk, but with the Ivy League, in terms of, that case at Dartmouth is very important right now. When it first came out, I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then a whole bunch of other things started popping up around, like NLRB case in California with USC. If this really happens, the Ivy system as it works right now in terms of their athletics is broken. Not just hurt, but broken. You're talking schools with like 6,000 people who go there and a tuition of upwards of $70,000 each, and every single one of those athletes that play there pays that.
Yes.
So they all of a sudden have to start paying out scholarships, even if it's just partial. You got to think, every single one of them, you lose all that tuition money, plus then the money that you then have to pay out to them as you would with scholarships for other things as well, room and board, food, all of that. So it's a heavy cost for those schools if everything goes here breaks that system. So that's why I say to people who think it's crazy that the idea of the Ivy League possibly putting football in another conference in order to make money to pay for that, just watch these court cases. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
But if they're looking for a secondary home to drop those schools in, that may be how Notre Dame got their AAU status. Just putting it out there to think.
Could be.
So the idea of not leaving the ACC to join the Big Ten might be possible. I still think, obviously there's room there for them to join the Big Ten, but there might be 2 paths. We'll see. But I'll leave you with that little thinker right there.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Hot Guy. Appreciate it. I just saw that Phil Parker was at the top of the Broyles Award list. I didn't want to interrupt you, though, because I wanted to respect you for the first time in months on one of your phone calls. I appreciate it. Appreciate it, sir.
Yeah, I saw that. Phil Parker better get that or else.
Yeah, he better get it. Yeah. All right, sir. Thanks.
Have a good day.
Call from
Ryan Thomas.
Ryan Thomas, can you hold on for just 1 second, sir?
Sure.
Thank you so very much. John Till, thank you for your super chat. Once again, sir, thank you so very much. What is Washington State, Oregon State did the PAC-12 for a year and made a scheduling deal with the Mountain West Conference. Then the next year snake bite them and go to the ACC for a
Not gonna
well.
happen.
I don't think you're gonna have that type of deal, John, because Mountain West Conference, for them to do a scheduling deal with the Oregon State, Washington State, they would have to need something on paper. They would have to be some sort of I don't see that happening. I think if now also if you it looks like Kirk Schultz, Washington State's president, is willing to make a deal with the playoff committee and say because the playoff committee has basically made a rule now for you to be an automatic, for your conference champion to be one of the top 6 or top 5, if it goes to 5+7, top 5 rated, highest rated conference champions to get an automatic berth, your conference has to have at least 8 members. It looks like Kirk Schultz is going to let that go through because there'd be a 2-team member. But in return, I think they're going to get Power 5 designation when it comes to playoff distribution money. I don't see that happening, John. Thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it. All right, sir, Mr. Thomas, the floor is yours. What do you got to say, good sir?
Yeah, I mean, I think along the lines of that, I think what you might see is Washington State and Oregon State getting P5 level money for the next 2 years of the playoffs in exchange for that, because there's no unanimity is needed for after these next 2 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't think Kirk Schultz has a pot to pee in with that, but I think what he does have is you can at least. I could see Washington State and Oregon State being independent for the next 2 years, and then having a scheduling agreement with the Mountain West with an agreement to join the Mountain West upon the beginning of the next playoff period. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I'm Navarez, that's what I'd make the deal. And it's probably and maybe that Oregon State and Washington State didn't want to make that commitment, and that's probably why they approached the Sun Belt Conference. But I mean, to go along the point of Oregon State and Washington State, looking at the Pac-12 bylaws, I agree that they are the voting members, Greg, as far as with respect to the physical assets of the PAC and its future and its intellectual property. The problem is these distributions, okay. Part of me is a CPA, and they're not assets. And half the time when it comes to nonprofits and accounting issues, the media doesn't know their head from their butt. The distribution revenue that's coming in here, I mean, that's going to be netted against expenses, and the cash is going to be distributed out to the members. Now, as long as those 10 other members are in the conference and their intellectual property is being monetized, and there is no provision within the bylaws of an exit fee amount or the mechanism of enforcing that exit fee by the forfeiture of distributions, that's not in the bylaws. It doesn't really matter whether they vote or not. They're entitled to their share of this year's revenues for the period of time that they're in the conference, period. And that's very clear in the bylaws as well. There isn't anything about voting membership when it comes to the distributions. So I think, at the end of the day, Oregon State and Washington State are certainly entitled to the net assets. But by the way, the net assets of the Pac-12 are closer to $30 to $40 million because they may have 120 million in assets, but they also have a good chunk of liabilities. And I'm not talking about the liability, the Comcast liability or whatever that is that they have. That's a different animal. That's coming out of the current year distributions for this year. But what I'm talking about is the fact is a lot of these assets are going to be in states that they don't have a school in. Like, you go to the Big Ten, any Big Ten stadium, they have a Big Ten production facility or facility, some sort of equipment facility in every Big Ten stadium. Same thing with the Pac-12. I mean, I'm not really sure what Washington State and Oregon State are going to do with equipment in Arizona or Utah or Boulder, but okay. So I think at the end of the day, they'll be able to keep that, the IP and the brand and the name, but I think that's all they're getting. I think it's probably, they have a fiduciary, even though that they're the voting members, they have a fiduciary duty to the other members as well. Because they still have a legal interest in the profits of the conference, and that's how the agreement's drawn up. And this thing is not going to sniff federal court at all whatsoever, because unincorporated associations are treated, for purposes of jurisdiction diversity, they're treated as members of the respective, they're treated as citizens of the respective states in which they have members, meaning the PAC-12 is being treated as having a residency in the state of Washington, as one of the other parties to the lawsuit, the University of Washington in Washington State. So this thing is going to go to the Washington Supreme Court, and that's where it's going to be decided, and it's not going to touch the federal court whatsoever, and that's where it's going to be. So, I mean, that we'll see how that works out, but I can guarantee you that when it gets to the Washington State Supreme Court, it's not going to have the same home field advantage as they do filing this out in the court out in, Pullman, Washington. You're going to have, there are a lot more UW grads on that state Supreme Court than there are Washington State grads. So, we'll see how that materializes. But going back to the point with the ACC, I agree with Mo and Immaculate that UVA and UNC wield a tremendous amount of political party power. I see this firsthand because I live in D.C. and I deal with these people all the time. I don't think this is like UCLA and Cal. When you're talking about SEC level money, no one's going to be forced to stay behind or forced to take some. And I think that's just BS saber rattling that's coming out. And, quite frankly, I know the AG here in Virginia, he's an idiot. I don't think he could really, I don't think he could litigate himself out of a bag, but that's another story. I really see at the end of the day that I don't think it's going to be political pressure, but I will say this. UVA and UNC, their heart is in the Big Ten. And I think they want to be there, and I think being reunited with Maryland will make them very happy, and I think that that's what their preference and their pick is. And I do think that Virginia Tech and NC State probably would get into the ACC, or SEC, because North Carolina and Virginia, when you look at Washington, D.C., exurbs and suburbs, Richmond, Virginia Beach, Charlotte, Raleigh, those are all huge markets that the SEC would love to get into. And, those schools could take a discount and come in at a discount, but, I think that's what the path is. But they're not going to get the same money, and however they work that out, it's really not going to matter. So I think from a market perspective, I agree with them, but I don't think it's going to be because of political pressure. I think it's going to be because of preference and because of market incentives for both the both the SEC and the Big Ten and North Carolina and UNC. So I think that's where that's going to be where it's going to go. As far as Notre Dame, I think that's an interesting conundrum, and I'll have a disagreement with you on this, Greg, and I'll say it time and time again. But it's only if Mr. Sankey wants to make it happen. I will say this time and time again, if the ACC gets rated and has that much hemorrhaging, that ESPN deal will be gone. And essentially, you're going to have a lot of ABC time slots that will open up. And I also think the fact is if there was a scheduling agreement for 4 or 5 games at the SEC in Notre Dame, exposure-wise, whether it's a home game or a road game, would probably end up more on that OTA ABC network than they would have on NBC. Mm-hmm. So I would not rule that out as a possibility because keep in mind, if Notre Dame goes to the Big Ten already has a $10, $15 million money gap on the SEC. If it gets into those SEC country and gets Notre Dame, that gap can grow to 20, 30 million, and you're going to see A&M and others flirting with the Big Ten. A&M and Missouri particularly might be flirting with the Big Ten. So I think that those are 2 interesting areas to take a look at. So I think Greg Sankey, whether or not his universities see this or not, whether or not you have these, these big wig, good old boys at Florida or UGA or South Carolina seen this or not. I've said this before. It's an existential threat to the SEC for the Big Ten to get Notre Dame and to get into SEC territory. So I see the incentive for Greg Sankey to play ball, to keep Notre Dame independent, to keep it independent. And if Notre Dame needs to park its other Olympic sports into the Big East, it can always do that, or whatever it wants. But I certainly think that ESPN is going to make it worth their while. But I don't know but Notre Dame is not going to be forced to do anything that it doesn't want to do, as long as it has the ability. And as long as if the Big 12 and the SEC are going to make money or can make money off Notre Dame in some sort of relationship or partnership, they will give the Notre Dame the votes to stay relevant for purposes.
Well, I will say this: the SEC has been acting in the way that they want to keep Notre Dame independent. They've been doing that for years.
Oh yeah,
but hold on a second, because they're incented to do that the way you laid it out. But I think there's other forces at play that is closing. Like for example, I think Notre Dame will always have a legitimate pathway to the college football playoffs as an independent program. I don't think that is the pressure point in which Notre Dame finally gives up their football independent. I think there's other forces at play that I don't think the SEC can really affect. One of them being the court cases, the revenue sharing. The other part is NBC wanting Notre Dame to be a Big Ten member. I think there's other things going on that the SEC can't really affect too much when it comes to the future of Notre Dame. That's my point.
Yeah, and your point is very valid. And I mean, I certainly see where it's coming from. I mean, I think really what's going to come down to is what the new leadership at Notre Dame sees and what they want and because I mean, Jenkins and Swarbrick are going to be gone after this year, after June 30th of this year. And, it really depends on, Notre Dame's, new athletic director is going to, take over, full throttle, will be another president. And, they may be less biased and less rooted they may be more willing to see the reality with the independent situation. So I mean that's where I agree. But as of right now, if Jenkins and Swarbrick were not going anywhere, if they weren't leaving or retiring soon, then I think I just that's an uphill climb for the Big Ten. But I think with new leadership, that's a game that will be a game changer for them. So I mean, especially.
Okay.
Notre Dame hired the NBC guy to be their AD. So I think certainly there's that relationship. So I certainly believe that there might be a lot of saber rattling and bleeping and moaning right now from Swarbrick and others there. But once they're out, I think that you could see a change of heart pretty quick. And I certainly think if you look at the push right now for Clemson and FSU, they're now talking about 25 at the earliest, 26, 27 of getting out of the ACC. So I mean that gives Notre Dame and new leadership plenty of time to make that decision. So
okay.
I mean so I think that's where it's probably headed. As far as the other money, and this will be my last point. The Big 12 is really on probation with the networks for the next 10 years or so. And, I think that there certainly will be a money gap in that 10-year period. But, I mean, with opportunities, there might be other opportunities with marketing and perhaps in areas that the Big Ten may not feel comfortable in going. For things like, for example, gaming and all that stuff. There are other ways that money gap could be closed. It's never going to be equal, but it will be enough to keep, it'll be enough to keep folks relevant. And, I think that that's probably what we have happening. I mean, certainly everybody's trying to stay, in front of or trying to grasp and settle and hang on to, what's in front of them right now, at least through till, 2036 or 2033 or whatever you want to look at it. And, I think that's completely fair. But if you look at how much college sports and conferences have changed in the past 10 years, 15 years, and 20 years, I don't think anybody, at the advent of the BCS system in 1999, I don't think anybody would have envisioned what we have today. And so I think 10 years from now, Greg, we could be looking at a different animal that probably, we could be looking at a completely different animal 10 years from now. And, they could become regionalized again, or what they could do is they could basically, break football off from the NCAA altogether, and, the conferences would get their check from the committee, but they wouldn't really, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
But I certainly, my viewpoint is I think you might end up with a semi-pro amateur league of, of its own doing, of, 60, 70 teams and split out by geographic divisions and, conference tournaments and things like that. And then, the conferences themselves, the big schools still get their money and will be happy, but there might be a little bit more equity, because I think the conference realignment, it has backfired both on ESPN and Fox in various different ways. And I think ESPN is realizing that it's probably going to have to end up paying Clemson and FSU the money that they want. So, I mean, that sweetheart deal with the ACC is only as good as it lasts, and it may not last. So those are my thoughts, and
Thanks, Ryan.
Hope that everything's good. But keep up the good work, Greg. Thank you for all you can. Make sure you sweep for cameras in the PATC theater. I hear that Mr. Stallions might be in there with bootlegging PATC production, so be careful.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Call from
JD.
JD, Mr. Seminole, the floor is yours, good sir. What do you got to say, man?
You doing okay, sir?
I'm doing great. Yep.
I was calling on just a couple of things here. One, you were asking about Jimbo and what's the link between him. Obviously, he's from West Virginia. He was asked in years past, would he ever be interested in coaching West Virginia? And surprisingly, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he kind of beamed up about it. He thought it would be really cool if he could coach them one day.
Yes,
and
I've seen that as well. Yes,
but the thing with Jimbo, he needs to take a couple years off. I don't know, and I'm not going to go into the whole backstory because it gets a little sordid. His last few years at FSU, his personal life just went into a turmoil, and he's never recovered. I mean, he went through a nasty divorce, multiple affairs, and I don't know if it was on him or not, but there was a lot of stuff going on. He had one of his sons was really sick. Now that young man's doing okay, and he just got a college scholarship he just got an offer to be a kicker. It's at another university. So there was just a lot going on in his personal life, and he's just never recovered. And he has such an ego. The ego is what killed him. Yeah. His ego is what killed him at Texas A&M. So, we say that he'll never be back. He'll never be coaching any major university again. Well, if he gets a dose of humility, he will. Because look at Steve Sarkisian. Yeah. Everybody forgets. He was on a bender, and if tell me if I'm out of turn. I mean, he was cheating on his wife with hookers, doing drugs, and all kinds of things back, I think, when he was at USC or even beforehand. And he's had a couple of go-arounds, He might have – where was he at? It might have been at Washington or wherever he was around during that spring. Now, he went to the Nick Saban coach revival. scenario being an analyst. So I don't know. I don't think we've seen the last of Jimbo if he can let his ego get, if he can get some humility again.
Yeah.
And again, I'm being redundant here. But and as far as the Holy Smokes Theater, the two biggest things that really caught my attention was now that Fox and ESPN are in the theater.
Yeah.
That's like the bankers are here now. Negotiations and the negotiations can begin. And I mean like real negotiations. And that was the biggest tip off there. So all this movement is happening is because everybody realizes, hey, it's almost that time. The season's about to end. But as far as that, on our end, no, we're not hearing anything. Just, there's just some that are still – there's a lot that believe it's going to be the SEC, but there's still a couple connected ones that still lean Big Ten, and I don't know. I don't know. That's the thing is, I don't know if your FSU money perch, if he's a money booster, they're going to favor the SEC.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to get the final say. And that's the part as far as the whole political aspect of it, I just don't know. The boosters, I think, have enough. They'll give the administration deference to whatever they think is in the best interest of the university. But at the end of the day, you don't want to upset the people that are writing the checks. And that's the part is it's just like I feel confident we're going to one of the two. But today you kind of insist or you have suggested that you think it's 80-20. I think it's still 50-50. And that's just my opinion.
Well, one of the, obviously during this long story that we're on here, obviously Florida State and Clemson are not going to shut themselves off from a potentiality of joining the Big Ten for obvious reasons, right?
Sure.
I think the 80-20 stuff comes in, and I think SEC's gotten a lot more aggressive, and the pathway from the ACC to the SEC is easier than the ACC to the Big Ten because of ESPN. So that's another reason why. But I can tell you, and I can't. I'm just going to have to give you a big old hint. That's what we said in our monologue. Clemson's had at least two hot bubble of action stuff going on, in which the chat room have described what that is, because we previously labeled something a hot bubble of action with Colorado in the Big 12. So Clemson is not just talking to one particular conference. They are. So you're right. Their lenses are wide open. They're not shutting out anybody. And Clemson has worked. They've worked it. They have worked it. And that now I understand the what it was like a month ago, 3 months ago, the article in early October talking about how things are possibly imminent for Clemson. Well, we did not hear that they were imminent, but I understand why the article was written that way, because there is so much stuff going on at Clemson University.
Well, Clemson's a proud university, and they believe that they'll be in the mix, from here on out. But everything that you said earlier in your monologue and when you were talking about Clemson is accurate. They want to make sure that they haven't missed their window of opportunity. Yeah. FSU's slumber is over. Okay? I mean, right now we're number 3 in recruiting. We might end up number 2 We have a chance to flip a couple more five stars in the next few weeks. And I don't know we would get up to number one, but right now we're at number 3. And in 2025, 2026, we're starting off really well in recruiting. We're getting great viewership, about 3-4 million a weekend. And so we're on the way back. I think we're going to be a lot better in 2025 than we are this year, and as far as the team. But
yeah.
And
it's not just what's going on with recruiting and what's going on in the football field. It has to do with market size, and it also has to do, let's be honest here, Florida State has emerged as a much bigger research university, more valuable research university. So Florida State has other advantages, and I think Clemson now kind of understands how they are perceived, and they see a window, and they're even more incentivized than Florida State, like you mentioned, to get through that window. That the window's open, and they're doing all they can to make sure they have a landing spot with the SEC of the Big Ten.
I think one thing, I still believe the SEC is going to try to want to lock up those teams, but they are going to want to slow walk it a little bit. I think the SEC figured they could hold off FSU and Clemson from joining until 2030, 2031, just to whenever they wanted them to join. And the fact that they're now forcing the issue, that was the whole thing. I mean, and other people, like I said, we've had this conversation before. The national media, kind of scoffed at what FSU was doing. FSU had to start the conversation. That's why they were so bold. They had to start the conversation. It was always just rumors. Oh, well, what's the ACC to do? And they're going to be stuck with, the GOR is going to hold them in place till such and such a time. No, I mean, you had to change the conversation to let everyone know, all parties involved, no, we're really, really serious about this. This isn't just saber rattling. Mm-hmm. We're about to make a move, and we have to get your attention. And during that whole process, yes, they seem aggressive. They didn't bash the ACC. No, all they did was state their case. And be honest with you, Clemson knew what FSU was about to do. So a lot of people knew what FSU was about to do. And they decided they were going to be the ones to get out in front, because some of the other universities, I don't think were comfortable doing it.
No.
And FSU finally just said, all right, we will. We'll get this started, and we'll catch the flack. But, we're the bigger brand in the ACC. We're one of the bigger brands in the country, and we got to get this. We got to get moving. We got to get going. We got to get out of here. I mean, it's just it's not burning to the ground, but you're going to get left behind without a ticket. Yeah. And so. But that's it. Like I said, I have some other things that I can go on to, but I know it's been a long show today. You're probably about to shut it down.
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
All right.
I appreciate it, JD. Appreciate the phone call, man. Thank you for calling. Call again. Keep us up on Florida State. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Have a good day.
Yep. Beautiful call by JD, Mr. Seminole. Yes, I think we're going to close down the live show. We've been on for 2.5 hours. We've covered a lot of big stories. One of them being the meeting today in the state of Washington, the hearing between the Pac-12, Pac-2 schools of Washington State and Oregon State versus the Pac-10 schools, and also the Holy Smokes Theater, the movement that's going on there, Clemson. If you need to rewatch the monologue, go ahead, rewatch it. There's some movement. Things are getting hotter. First quarter of 2024. Buckle in. Brace for impact. First quarter of 2024. January, February, March. We believe some declaration, something is going to be said in public. And the Holy Smokes Theater is going to get real hot. So before you leave the chat, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, get yourself notified. We could be coming up live again, depending on the breaking news that's coming out of the state of Washington. We could be coming up live again later today. And of course, smash that like button if you like the content. Give us a thumbs down if you do not like the content, and put in the comment section on what we can do better here at Peek Around the Corner. So from all of us at PATC to all of you, until next time, please you all take great care of each other. Thank you so very much.